So why don't we jump in here? So excited to have everybody join us today for our annual benchmarking report and insights. And as we talk to Becky about this year's findings, really excited to dive into everything. As always, you can get in touch with either of us anytime you want. If you have any questions or suggestions for next year's survey or any further developments or other cuts if we're able to provide them. So please feel free to get in touch. So I am Jenn Pedde. I am the VP of Customer Advocacy for PeoplePath. I've been with the company for 2 years. And before that, I was a client of PeoplePath for 5 years, managing a global management consulting alumni program. So I have lots of experience in this world. And I'm also very excited to see Dr. Rebecca Paluch, who is joining us today, who helps us every year with the survey and the report itself. And so, Becky, I'll let you give you a little introduction this morning for yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming to today's webinar. I got interested in alumni programs as I was doing my dissertation at Cornell University. That's how I connected with Jenn and the PeoplePath team. It's been a really exciting ride. We've been working, collaborating on the benchmarking report for about 3 years now. And every year it's really exciting to see new findings, see how these alumni programs are changing. So I'm excited to present today's findings.
Great, thank you. For those of you who are new to any PeoplePath event, we are excited to have you and welcome you to our amazing community of alumni program managers and their teams. PeoplePath is an organization that is based in Seattle and in Munich. We have a presence all around the world with amazingly huge companies down to small nonprofits and all in between. And so we're very excited to do these events and offer insights and help everyone just level up and increase their strategy and get better together. And so that's why we're excited to have you. We are also going to be inviting people to join us in New York. So if you're able to, in October, we are going to be gathering everyone at the Starbucks Empire State Building's Reserve. And so we're going to have an afternoon of networking and a panel presentation and of course, coffee and some food. So please do join us. It is free to attend. We will not be streaming it live. So unfortunately, if you're not in the area, hopefully you'll be able to join us at future events and we'll kind of bring some of those insights into other things. But otherwise, we're excited to have you. So please do consider joining up on our website. And getting into the bulk of today. So Becky, I will let you take it away with getting us started with the benchmarking report insights.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so every year, the goal of the report is to both track these changes over time. It's really interesting to see how alumni programs as a whole are growing and evolving. But each year, we also wanted to dive into something a little bit new, make sure that the report is providing new and the most up-to-date information. So this year, what we decided to really focus on is looking at how layoffs were affecting alumni programs, as well as how programs were evolving in terms of the career transition support they were offering. We also wanted to dive more deeply into alumni engagement and program activity. A lot of the times the questions that we get are asking for specific numbers. What does this type of engagement look like at other organizations? What kind of revenue are other organizations seeing from their alumni programs or the alumni referrals? So we wanted to dive a little bit more deeply into those specifics.
Great.
So I want to start off doing some quick facts, laying down some baseline numbers about what we're seeing with alumni programs. A majority of alumni programs are hitting that are in that 3 to 20 year age range, so about 75%. Alumni programs, what was interesting is that we are seeing some difference in newer alumni programs. So as you can see, in 2022, it was about 24%. We saw less kind of newer emerging alumni programs in 2023. That was at about 18% this year. Jenn, I just wanted to ask for your thoughts. Do you think that's showing that there are fewer alumni programs that are just starting to get rolling in their organizations?
I think that the people that take the survey typically have established programs. And so we might not have gotten the people that have started in the last 6 months. And there's actually been quite a few launches that we've had and seen other programs kind of get started in the last year. So this is one of those few times where I think that sometimes, depending on who takes the survey and where they are in their program, maybe doesn't necessarily reflect the full story, that actually I do think right about now is the perfect time to be starting alumni programs, and that we are seeing that there's a lot of interest in programs that maybe have never had a full platform or have never had a program at all, and so are just kind of coming to us and getting started. So I do think the number is probably a little lower than I would actually say is happening out in the market.
Interesting. Let's move to the next set of slides on FTEs here. So this was an interesting data collection point. What we saw is that larger programs are pretty much holding steady. So programs with 3 or more FTEs was about 24% in 2023, which mirrors pretty closely to what we saw in 2022. So these larger programs are definitely holding steady in terms of the overall range of alumni programs. We did see more movement in these smaller alumni programs. That was really interesting. In 2023, about 84% of programs had at least one full-time equivalent or one full-time employee dedicated to that alumni program, whereas in 2022, it was at about 72%. What that's suggesting to us is that even in these smaller programs, organizations are recognizing the importance of the alumni program and are really dedicating that full-time person to the alumni program. So when we look at the program budget, we see that both age and size of the program really matters in terms of the amount of budget that's being allocated to the program. In particular, size, of course, it makes sense. The bigger the program, the more budget that's going to be allocated to it. But the age was kind of interesting, and that's what we dug into a little bit more here. When we looked at organizations that had a budget of $200,000 or more, 71% of those were at least 5 years old or older. So, big chunk of those programs that have larger budgets are at least 5 years old. That means they're a little bit more established. They've already proven the value of the alumni program to the organization. Now, when we look at these organizations with smaller amounts of budget, these are younger programs. I think this is going to be a really interesting group to watch, because this is going to be the group that, as they show their value to the organization is going to be dedicating more of the budget. So I think these are really going to be the movers in terms of what we see over time with growth of budget. So go next one here. Alumni activities, again, we're seeing this has been standardizing quite a bit over the past few years. While earlier on in benchmarking reports, there was more variation, we're starting to see the standard set of activities, things like company news and information that get sent out, in-person events, alumni newsletters. These are pretty common in most alumni programs. What was interesting to see was that there seems to be an increase in programs using a central technology platform. Again, this really speaks to the maturity of alumni programs. As alumni programs continue to grow, the alumni base gets larger, more services and benefits are being offered. It becomes so much more important to have that central technology platform to make it easy for both you all to manage the program, as well as for alumni to find the things that they need from your program. Great. So one of the things that's been interesting to me personally as an HR scholar is how the alumni program gets integrated into the employee lifecycle. You wouldn't have alumni without the employees first, right? So I think one of the things that I've seen evolving quite a bit over the past few years as well is when I started to get into this, it seemed to be kind of alumni programs as its separate entity, separate kind of function within the organization. And over time, I've seen increasing integration with the employee lifecycle, which is fantastic. It makes that transition from that employee stage into the alumni stage so much smoother. And it really provides a better experience for that person who's switching from an employee to an alum. So let's move into this data. One of the things I wanted to emphasize, and I probably have in the past, so apologies for repeating myself from past webinars, It's so important to let the employees know early on about the alumni program. It's never too soon to start introducing that alumni program. About 50% are introducing the alumni program to new employees during the recruitment process. So before they even start the employee period, starting to get them knowing about how the organization is supporting people even after they leave. 55% are also promoting the alumni program during that onboarding and orientation process. I just wanted to note that I actually have some newer research as well that shows that when organizations advertise the alumni program to potential employees, it increases attraction to the organization, which should increase the number of applicants that actually apply. It also seems to attract a wider range of potential applicants. So this may be something that you can use to stand out in the crowd, even in the recruitment phase. Career transition support was huge this year. I think, it was expected that career transition would take more of a center stage, considering how much movement there has been in the labor market. We were really surprised to see just how much it has changed. So 74% this year started to offer some form of offboarding services to their departing employees. This was up about 17% from last year. If you could move to the next slide. Where the numbers really become more dramatic is when we look at these individual practices. So you can see none of these practices were offered by more than 50% of organizations in 2022. Now we're seeing, career counseling, resume and cover letter support, job search administrative support, apologies for this lighting here, are really taking center stage in this career transition stage. So I think this is something really important to highlight. If you're not doing already, this is an area that is quickly growing, so you don't want to be left behind. And these are things that I see a question here if these offboarding supports are being independently offered or coordinated amongst other divisions in the organization. As Jenn will talk about in just a second, we are seeing that there's more coordination across the organization. And so many of these things are likely being coordinated with recruitment or with other HR service components. But what I want to emphasize here is it's so important for the alumni team to be a part of that, to have a seat at the table in these offerings, because this is essentially that portion where you're taking control of that transition process into the alumni program. And if there are any other questions, I should say, please feel free to throw them in the chat or to raise a hand and jump in. We can move to the next slide. So I want to emphasize why this matters. I think career transition support is one of those things that isn't necessarily intuitive. A lot of companies are saying, why would I help employees leave my organization, right? And for many of you, this is so important because it's really, again, trying to engage people before they leave to get them to become loyal and dedicated alums. Here, I want to highlight a case study where a global bank with about 60,000 employees decided they wanted to invest more in their outplacement services. They started offering systematic level coaching, job search support, interview preparation, and careers and skills assessment courses. Again, this wasn't, just at certain offices. This was at a systematic organization-wide level. If you could go to the next slide. So why this is important. Of the people that participated in this program, there was a 100% satisfaction rating. So that's 100% of these people participating and leaving are already satisfied and happy with the organization before they become alumni. And you can imagine that's just going to increase their dedication and loyalty to the organization. The other thing I wanted to mention is a lot of the times, I think, especially with what we hear in the news, people are only staying at organizations for 2 to 5 years or 3 to 5 years. So you're thinking, okay, they have that experience with job search or, resumes and cover letters, but there's a good portion of your organization that have been off the market for a while. And these are also likely to become some of your most loyal alumni. So this outplacement support is really important because you're not only showing your appreciation for these loyal employees, you're also helping them get set in their next role and trying to take advantage of getting them into a dedicated alum kind of mindset. We can move to the next one. So for the exit process, this has been pretty standard. We are seeing a majority, almost 100% here, are offering some sort of formal exit survey or interview. What I wanted to highlight here is that many of you are already doing this, but if you're not, this is a great time to offer that information about the alumni program. So 76% are offering alumni materials before leaving or sending them that email to encourage them to join the network. About 58% are having that one-on-one interaction where they're asking a supervisor or leader to actually meet with that exiting employee. So for boomerangs, this has been a really important topic, and it's really hitting the news much more. We're seeing boomerangs come back as people have been switching jobs, going through the great reshuffle. So this pretty much stayed the same also from last year in terms of about 8% of new hires are in the boomerang employees. But if we could go to the next slide. I want to applaud you all because this was the cool part to see. There was a big jump in who's actually tracking boomerang employees. So about 60% of you all were tracking those boomerang rehires in 2022. Now we're up to 82%. I would love to see in the next year's report, getting that up into the 90s. So hopefully this is that encouragement to think about tracking boomerang employees if you're not already doing that.
Yeah, this was my favorite part of the whole report. Sophistication, right? Like people are getting better at digging into the insights that are in the organization, right? Those are some of the harder parts to do. Talent acquisition is typically the easier of the two when you think about business development, but these are really great places to start. And so I'm very excited to see where things are going to go in the next few years myself.
Me too.
And that kind of brings us to a case study we just did. So I don't believe that she's on the webinar today, but we met with the alumni program manager of Bechtel recently. Her name is Ellen, and she shared with us some of her insights. And they are seeing some incredible numbers coming out of their program. And so it's just wanting something to highlight that they saw 25% of their new hires last year as boomerangs. And they were seeing that trend well into Q1 when we were speaking this year. So 22% so far. So if everything keeps going, they'll probably see likely the same. And the biggest thing was that they saw 34% savings in their recruitment from using the alumni program. And at the time that these people were applying and trying to get back into organizations, for every one boomerang that was hired, 3 of them were active in the community. So basically they were there, they were engaged, they were using the services, they were using the materials, and they were active and looking for jobs in the platform. And so the way they were able to kind of showcase the recruitment savings was by comparing it to all the other places they are using to share jobs. So the cost per adding a job description to LinkedIn or Indeed or other places, referrals were included in this. So by having a team and the resource to manage the program, they were able to see some really, really great results. And the big thing about them is that they always knew alumni were going to be central to a rehiring campaign. And so while they did have to let people go in 2020 because of the pandemic, it was always a plan to bring them back. And so alumni were just central to their branding, to their mission, to their strategy. And so having that integration, like we were talking about earlier with the employee lifecycle and into those HR systems, you see some really, really great results. So really excited to see them. I'll share these slides with everyone who is signed up, and you'll be able to click on the links and read more about these things as well.
One of the things that was new to this year's report, and a shout out and a thank you to Adrian for recommending this, we wanted to look a little bit more closely at the retired alumni programming. So about 30% here are offering some sort of special events for retirees. This can include things like exclusive networking events, retiree-specific news and communication, transition coaching, which I thought was kind of cool, and then offering certain special projects or spot assignments to those retirees. I think mentoring opportunities is a huge area for future value for these retirees to stay connected to the organization. So again, some of the information is both for you to know, but also to maybe get you thinking about how you could adapt that alumni program. And I think we're going to continue to see growth in retiree specific programming, just because, of course, we're seeing this change in the generations in organizations as baby boomers start to retire. There's going to be a larger range of alumni that are in that retiree portion.
Yeah, it's a really good note. I mean, it's 2023, but they say that all boomers will be of retirement age by the end of the decade. So you're starting to see that transition now, right? That the next few years, as more and more get closer to retirement age, maybe retire earlier, that those are going to be really interesting people to watch because they've had such an interesting career and maybe not yet ready to relax, right? So these people might be looking for opportunities for contract work, for barred opportunities, right? So they're going to be looking for things to do and still be relevant in their different circles. So we're getting this question a lot, and I think people are preparing for this. So it's really cool to see this first stat this year.
And another thing I just wanted to highlight about that is, as we said, we talked about integrated into the employee life cycle, as well as this upcoming wave of retirees. If they're starting to be put into place now, it gives, again, these people who are on the verge of retirement a heads up about what's to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's another audience to think about engaging. So it kind of brings us right perfectly into this next section of engagement. So I'm really excited to share this year because it's brand new for us in the last few years. And what we tried to do is just get a baseline for a few of our different activities. So what are people doing and what are they expecting to see from those actions? And so we just started with some simple things. But what I want to caveat this section with is that not everyone who took the report gave these numbers, which means that not everyone is tracking these things. And we do try to highlight these in the next few slides, but they were encouraging and some actually surprising. And so I'm excited to kind of show you kind of what to expect in some baselines. So the first thing, and this kind of goes back to the retiree portion and the HR life cycle we've been talking about, but in addition to those two things, we've seen 97% of our programs are collaborating with other internal teams, which is wonderful. So seeing content coming from the different business resource groups that companies have. So areas of like DE&I or LGBTQ or veterans or women or any other kind of subsets in these companies, they're leveraging that content and they're using things that are already created to put into their alumni programs and offer more. And that connectivity helps with the employee branding as well as the alumni engagement. And so we're also seeing it with CSR and social impact, and ESG is growing in interesting companies. We're seeing that here too. So pretty much there was only 3% that just do not work with other internal teams, and I don't know reasons why, but I would encourage everyone to at least approach a different department if you haven't worked with them already, and just see what's there, what content you could use, what saves you time, what events are coming up that you can have alumni invited to. But it's just a really great stat to start off this section with. So we looked at a couple of different things. We looked at logins, we looked at newsletters, and we looked at events. And within logins, so the big thing this year was the increase in people that are using a third-party platform. So not just PeoplePath, everything else out in the world that offers these things. So having a program in a platform allows you to track much more data, allows you to own more data. And so what we are seeing is that of those that have alumni programs with a platform, that 90% of programs are tracking logins, which is great. You want to know baseline day-to-day community health, right? So how are things going? And 93% are including employee in their programs. So this number has jumped up quite a bit. We see it kind of in a couple of different ways on if they have employees in their programs. The way that we think about employees and programs is it's not always 100% of employees that are in these programs. They could be certain senior levels. They could be, if it's consulting or law firms, it could be just the consultants or the partners. There's a couple of different ways to cut up how you might have employees in the system, but they are looking at these numbers as well when they do have employees in the programs. So the fact that they are tracking is fantastic. And what they are seeing is that Depending on the size of the organization, you might have a different level of engagement, but people are regularly logging in between 15 and 30% a year, and sometimes multiple times. So tracking those numbers is really great. What I would love to see in the future is more of the actual results, right? So what we want to do is correlate the size of the program to logins in the future once we get more data. So hopefully keep in mind that, these things while you're sharing your reports this year, but something we want to continue asking about is just the engagement people are seeing in logins and platform updates and profile updates and things. Moving into newsletters. So in past years, we didn't ask this time, but in past years, we've asked just how often are people communicating with their programs or their audiences. And generally what we've seen consistently in past reports is that it's either a monthly or quarterly basis that someone is sending out a newsletter. The newsletters typically all have links that report back to the platform that they are using to make that opportunity to have people go directly to the hub of the alumni experience. And what they are tracking is the open rate and the click-through rate. And this does differ amongst programs of which platforms they're using, if they're using outside email sources, there's a mix, but essentially people are tracking this data. So that's great. So knowing what's resonating with your alumni when you send these newsletters out is super important. So the more people are clicking on the things that they like, the more you want to offer that and get them to come back to your website. What we see is the open rate is huge. This was no surprise to me in that sense that alumni newsletters are some of the most open and read pieces of content in most companies. And the reason for that is because that audience has such a connection back to that organization that they are looking for that content, whereas the average person in the company might not be, right? So the employees, the former employees have that connection. So 59% of programs have an open rate of more than 40%. This will change next year because I was not expecting that number to be that high, to be quite honest, in the first time we went through this. And so next year, we're going to have more sections to be able to define this number more specifically. But the fact that more than half of programs get more than 40% really resonates with alumni, and that this is something useful and that they're interacting with the content and engaged. Moving into events, so we were very curious about events because I have always said that events are probably the number one way to get people to engage in a program. And what we are seeing is that 94% of people do track the number of events that they have every year, which is easy enough to do, right? So if you are using a platform, you can count how many you've posted, or if you're using something else, you can usually keep track pretty easily of how many you're doing. And 90% track attendance, which is pretty difficult in any online community. When you take something offline, getting that attendance number and putting it back into a system can be clunky, but it is useful because then you can see who RSVPs and who attends, and then you know your most engaged audience member. So 50% of companies hold less than 50 events a year, which is fine. I think 50 is a big number to do, depending on your size, of course. And 39% hold about 10 to 50 events per year. So that's roughly about right. If you are brand new to this, what I generally recommend is that people have maybe 2 events per year, one social and one thought-based. So you kind of get both different audience types while you're thinking about segmentation. But ultimately, having 2 events per year is a light lift. Not usually budget heavy. They could be virtual or in person or a mix, but genuinely they are things that people engage with and are looking forward to. And they log into that platform, they see something to sign up for. It's something that gets them to come back. And what we saw was 59% of programs have around 1,000 or less people attend. And so when you think about the size of these programs, they could be anywhere from 1,000 to 400,000 people in your program, depending on the size of your company. 1,000 can be relative. So again, when we do these numbers in the future, I would love to correlate these to size, but we just don't have it at the moment. But there's some promising things and some really good baseline numbers here. And so just thinking about the exact numbers of events that people are hosting, not everyone is tracking. So it's one thing I do want to point out is that a small number, 6% are not tracking the number of events, and about 10% are not tracking attendance at all. So these are events I see in the comments here. They're mostly led by the alumni team, but they're not all alumni originated events. Again, going back to that 97% of programs are collaborating with other departments, they can be events that already are being hosted by other departments. So maybe there's a volunteering event and alumni get invited to that. So it's not all completely alumni oriented. These also could be client events that a company might be hosting, and so inviting alumni clients to those things. So there's a lot of segmentation and splitting up of those things, but I would say that it's not 100% alumni originated or alumni dedicated.
I think that also highlights the points that you were making before about making sure you're collaborating with others in the organization. That's an interesting point.
Oh yeah, I mean, events are heavy lifts, right? And so even if they're online, there's all the things you have to do to get ready for them. So if you can find someone else who's already done that legwork for you, definitely like tack onto it, and they'll be happy for the extra audience, right? The other people to be involved and spread the word. So it's usually a win-win when you're working with other departments. Great. So I will hand it back over to you and talk about tracking data.
Sounds great. So as I dive into tracking data, I just want to highlight the point that we did ask some of these questions slightly differently this year, because we did want to get more into the specific data rather than just asking if you're tracking data. We wanted to know exactly what it was that you were tracking and what these outcomes looked like. So the numbers may look a little bit different this year, and if we can dive into that. So here is where you'll see some of these differences. Again, I want to say great job in tracking those boomerangs. We saw a majority, 82%, were tracking the boomerang rehires. There are some lower numbers here for alumni assisted sales, alumni referrals for new hires, and that net promoter score. This looked a little bit higher in past year reports because we asked just generally, are you tracking these figures? This year we asked, what amount of alumni assisted sales are you seeing? How are you formally, or what are the numbers of alumni referrals? And so this is why we're seeing slightly lower numbers. Going into business development, just as a quick note, we continually see that business development, brand ambassadorship, and talent are the three main drivers of programs. So this is why we wanted to dig more deeply into this specific data. So as previously mentioned, only 17% are systematically tracking. Although with this small number, what we're seeing is that 3 to 25% of total revenue is coming from alumni. So I know this isn't applicable for all organizations and types of businesses, but if you can link some form of the revenue that is being generated to alumni, this is a really great area to show value to the organization.
And there's two different ways to do that. Typically, I usually get that as a follow-up question of how are people tracking this. It is difficult because financial systems don't always connect to any other system purposely by design. And so what we are seeing is that, one, if you have an organization that will let you update any intake system with a box that allows you to check alumni, or any other augmentation you can make to that form, is usually the best way. And then you can pull a list through your systems at the end of the year. The other way is just manually asking for a list of top 20 deals or something of that nature to connect your list of alumni at those companies and kind of identify where your communities are. So it's not as official or as effective, but it's still telling a great story about the connectivity and building the case for helping people move into those client organizations.
So for talent acquisition, although we saw really great boomerang numbers, there's less emphasis about offering that formal referral program. However, we saw a wide range of how referral programs are being conducted. Awards for successful referrals can go as high as $10,000. A lot of you noted that this is really dependent on things like location, level of the position being hired for. So there is quite a bit of variation within this, within referral programs.
And referral programs that are functioning do see a mix of either cash awards or nonprofit donations. So either way is something we are seeing in those programs.
And then brand ambassadorship, I'll admit I was a little bit surprised to see that this number was so low in terms of actual what does that brand ambassadorship look like. So very few could actually present what that net promoter score looked like, whether you're asking it as a satisfaction score, so highly satisfied to very unsatisfied in terms of recommending that organization or recommending the alumni program or recommending it as a place to work. or offering that full Net Promoter Score. We really want to advocate for tracking that brand ambassadorship in the future and getting those set numbers, understanding if your score is a 9.5 or 5.4, really being able to zero in on what the brand ambassadorship looks like.
Yeah, and I think brand ambassadorship is always ranked lower than the other two in its importance to programs. And we kind of know that it is happening, but we just don't track it. And so one of the things I would hope to see is an increase in surveys. And we do have templates available for anyone who is on this call who may be curious about what these numbers might look like that ask those satisfaction questions. And if you do this every year or every other year, you'll start to see some trends. And it's another way to showcase those metrics. If you can't get business development numbers and you can't get talent acquisition numbers, this is an easy one to do and to have something in your program if you don't have the other two.
About the alumni manager. So this is some of the information that isn't necessarily included in the report that's widespread, but we offer this information hoping that it helps you advocate for more resources for yourself. So the breakdown was really interesting. We are seeing the largest department where alumni managers are sitting is in that human resources or talent department. We do see, continually see that marketing and business development are other areas where alumni managers are sitting. We also see that there are people that are kind of spread across different divisions. And I think this does, again, speak to how important alumni programs are to various departments. So, people who are splitting their time on business development and HR or HR and marketing. This is definitely a multi-dimensional type of program, right? When we look at the money, I think this is one that people are really most curious about. About 70% of you all are making 100,000 or more in total compensation. So this is right now growing slightly over the years. 63% are allocating at least 75% of their time to managing the alumni program. So again, this really speaks to the growing recognition of how much time and energy does have to be dedicated into an alumni program in order for it to be successful.
Yeah, and I think it's important to actually comment on the 75% of time I think has grown as well. Like when we talk about split roles, sometimes people think it's like, oh, 30% of my time or half of my time. And it's actually the opposite. We're seeing that trend go into that full-time role is less split and more full.
This year, we did a few more breakdowns. We had some questions about getting at specifics in terms of, well, where are we seeing differences in compensation? Even though we saw more people are sitting in the human resources or talent departments, it seems to be the people that are sitting in the business development divisions are the ones that are securing higher salaries and total compensation. So when we looked at people who are making over 120,000, 80% of those were in the business development areas. And then if we look at compensation by position, it's pretty much as you would expect. We looked at people who are making over 100,000. So 93% of directors or executives are making over 100,000. Managers, about 77%. What we do see is this drop between the manager and non-supervisory role. So only about 30% of people in non-supervisory roles are making over 100,000. We're hoping, again, that this can help you advocate for more, money and resources for yourself as you, negotiate salaries. Hopefully you can bring some of this data back to your organization.
Yeah, and as you're thinking about building out your teams, you might have your alumni program managers, your full-time equivalent, but then maybe have a split role for a junior position. So these things are hopefully helpful to show that there's a mix of the types of staff that we see. So we said earlier when we started this that 3 FTEs are becoming more common, but as we saw in the Bechtel case study, actually all the people that were on that team, there was 3 people on that team and none of them were full-time. They all had split roles. So 3 people among split roles. The sky's the limit with how you decide how you want to structure your team, but there are a lot of creative options out there. So wanted to point that out.
So this, we've presented the bulk of the data from the report. Hopefully that was informative and is helpful for you all in managing your alumni programs. This brings us to the exciting portion, I think, is in terms of, well, what's ahead? I think many of you are hearing all of the talk about AI and how AI is going to change work. I want to raise the importance of thinking about AI also for your alumni program. So we want to think about, and we're curious to see how AI will impact alumni programming. So can programs use AI to better connect with alumni? Are there programs that you can offer to support alumni in adjusting to AI? We also wanted to hear a little bit from you all and see if there are ways that you're thinking about integrating AI or using AI in your programs. This may be actually in terms of helping you program. It may be in terms of offering training. It may be in terms of how you're integrating alumni with recruiting. Are there any ways that you are thinking about implementing AI into your alumni program? And feel free to.
I was going to say, have it on the camera, you can put it in the chat, you can tell us what you want. And it also might be too soon. I have not really heard this chatter much yet in the programs, but I know in the world, AI is dominating headlines. So if anyone has any examples and would love to share, we'd love to hear them. But might not, so. Christian, hello.
Hey everyone, good morning, good afternoon. First of all, thank you very much for this super insightful presentation. Really love it. Took a lot from it, particularly from the pretty recent slides. now on the AI thing, I guess, well, Jenn, you're spot on when saying it's maybe pretty soon. So we have kind of in common that we are still trying to get our arms around this very young, very dynamic, very innovative phenomenon. And so is it with SAP alumni relations. And maybe 2 or 3 thoughts on this one. A low-brainer actually is, at least for us, that we just recently, and it will be going out tomorrow, will be help our company on recruiting AI professionals, AI talents. So one of our SAP's hiring newsletters tomorrow will be addressing particularly this topic. SAP's hiring AI related, and so then with a couple of open posts. I mean, this is, as said, a low-brainer for us, and so alumni relations, of course, this is key for our business. The second, and this is really still kind of to be carved out in more detail, to be made more concrete, is when it comes to what we call network intelligence. So to reach out to our alumni as our ecosystems, our partners, customers, jointly with us, get into a discussion, hey, what should we all together as one SAP ecosystem make out of this new phenomenon? And we are thinking about, of course, surveying folks, maybe gathering C-suite alumni and a round table to have a discussion. So this is where we have it on our radar, as said, and we are offering this to our stakeholders internally. Hey, whenever you guys think it makes sense to get into discussion as you used to be in other topics, just let us know and we'll take it from there. And the third thing just came to my mind right before joining this call, because I'm working on another survey to ask our early talent community what we can do better at engaging them in things. And maybe for our day-to-day business, one opportunity with AI is to make our surveys with alumni, of course, others as well, more open text related. So not too tailored with closed interviewing style, Likert scale and what have you, net promoter, but just having a text box. Hey, write down what you think, what's close to your heart. Let us know. As you all know, it gets pretty tricky to analyze stuff if you then get 600 or up to 1,000 responses or so when you have open text boxes only. With AI, potentially it gets more easy to then carve out the key messages out of those feedbacks. So for our program, this is 3 things that we have in our mind, and to leverage AI best I can. But as said, still in flux, pretty early, lots of opportunities, of course, behind them, and we'll all together be able to leverage this best we can for our business.
That's great.
I love those suggestions. Yeah, I think the point that you made about filling new positions that will need AI expertise and going to your alumni base, I hadn't even thought about that. That's a really great idea. Yeah, Thank you for offering that. Is there anybody else that has any thoughts about how they're integrating AI? Again, I know this is quite early, so we are just hoping to kind of get you thinking about it. maybe this is something you reflect on over the next few weeks or few months. And maybe we'll see some questions pop up in 2024 survey asking you what you're thinking or what you're already doing in terms of integrating AI into your alumni program. Thank you.
Yeah. And I think it's good too that, it's good to think about for the efficiencies that we can create. And that's something we're thinking about at PeoplePath as well. Just what are opportunities for the platform to evolve and include these things. So it's an internal discussion that we're having as well. But I think even with AI, the real big takeaway from this year's report, in my opinion, was that engagement will also still just need to always be there, right? That connectivity of that alumni organization, no matter how efficient the systems are, that creativity and that programming will always need to be kind of there and offered to make sure that these things are getting those results that we are looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that kind of brings us to our last point here of what are we looking forward to next year, which is our 10-year anniversary of doing this report. So we're already putting some insights together, believe it or not, that we just launched this one this year. And so we're starting to think through like, what questions did we ask 10 years ago? How have things changed within the 10 years? So next year's report, I'm very excited to have a nice retrospective of where the industry has been and where it is going, but it is starting now. So if there are any thoughts or questions or things you want to see into that next year's report, as always, we love your feedback. And as you can tell, we definitely include it from year to year. So if you have questions now in the chat, we've got a few minutes left about anything that we've covered today or anything that we want to cover in the future. So we'd love to see if there's any other thoughts or questions before we end our webinar.
And I just want to reemphasize, we could not do this report without your contributions. So again, thinking about 2024, when you see that email coming through asking you to contribute to the survey, I hope you just take that time to respond and give that feedback. This is so important in terms of our knowledge and understanding of alumni programs. So thank you so much to everybody who participated in the survey.
Yes, absolutely. I know you get hounded by all of us and our emails, and so we appreciate every minute you take. And I know each year Becky is always asking me to remove questions because I want to know the world. So she's the one keeping it in check. So I appreciate that too. But all right, well, if there are no other questions, it has been wonderful. Christian, thank you for hopping on and sharing. Thank you for everybody in the chat who's asked a question already. And thank you to Becky most of all, who is a pleasure to work with and lovely to put this together every year. I'm very excited. So thank you, everyone. And we'll see you hopefully at the New York event, and if not, any other future event that we're hosting. So thanks to everybody and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you.